there's a warning for The Witch. I loved it, but I like that. I mean, and it's based on all real things. Like those people actually thought all that stuff. Like you would murder your children for playing with an animal because, you know, animals are witches' familiars. Like, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. You might want to rethink that a little.
I mean, Todd, let's be honest here. There's a reason they had to leave England. They were too crazy. Like I'm serious. Hey, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Outsiders.
I'm Todd Pickering.
I'm Seth Austin.
And we're a couple of actors stuck on the outside trying to make our way to the inside of the biz.
Hollywood, baby. So, today we are talking about horror films. Before we get into that,
I love horror films.
Yeah, there's so many of them, and some of them are so incredible, and some of them are not, and we're going to talk about that. But before that, we're going to tell you our email address. It's theoutsidersbiz@gmail.com. That's theoutsidersbiz@gmail.com.
Okay, let me write that down. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's you do know too that horror movies are the biggest bang for buck for Hollywood. So if we're talking business, the biz, that you don't need a name in it. You can be low budget. So they are the most
I didn't know that,
movies.
But it makes sense. Like, look at those films, a lot of the found footage movies, right? I mean, those are all super, super, super low budget. The Blair Witch Project, right, is the movie it's the most profitable movie of all time, I think, still, because it only cost $35,000 to make, but it made $250 million something worldwide. And, you know, that's nothing to sneeze at. And then it spawned an entire genre. I mean, that film, say what you will about it, but it was an important film as far as like historical landmarks in filmmaking.
Yeah, it's funny we're talking about this because that's absolutely true. We're talking about the biz. We started talking, talking about Halloween, October horror, but that is 100% true. And part of that was that film put all of its money in advertising, and people don't understand that has to be part of your budget.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that movie had put all of its money in advertising.
Well, it doesn't matter how cheap a movie is. If people don't go out and see it, it's never gonna, so that was, like you said, it was like so low budget and all done. But did you know how they filmed that?
In the word of mouth. What do you mean? How
was it a big improv for the three actors?
Oh, no, I didn't know that it was all improv. I mean, I guess I kind of did at the time. I forgot that part of it.
Well, the directors would leave them, you know how in the plot of the Blair Witch, for those of you who don't know, no spoilers, I'm definitely going to do no spoilers, but it's three people looking for the Blair Witch, and they all had a camera. So it was all done as if it was a documentary. And the directors would leave them notes. They knew at the end of the shooting day, they'd get their notes, and they would tell them the parts of the plot. And so, most of it was improv. I mean, you want to talk about a nightmare in editing. There's your Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
Editing.
And I imagine that was interesting for the actors to like wake up every day and then have something new that they weren't ready for or expecting. It kind of, it can't help but make it like sort of real, right? If they just buy into it and go with it. That's interesting.
So therefore it was real. Some of the scares were just like,
were actually real.
It was just scary being, so they technically were never seeing they knew they were safe. It was almost more like being in a play. So they knew they were safe.
Right. That's interesting. I didn't know that. I maybe I'd heard that and forgotten about it. That'd be a really strange way to work as an actor. Like there's nothing else that I've ever heard of that works that way.
No.
Yeah, like a narrative.
I would love to work that way as an actor.
Yeah, it's almost like, I almost wanted to say it's like a reality show. It's not though, but it like, you're put in a situation and then how are you going to react kind of a thing, right? More than here's the words that you say,
Absolutely. And you know what? When you say reality show, it's like, God, that movie's 25 years old, right? At this point, 20?
Is it that old? How old am I? I'm 38, and that came out when I was in late high school. So it's not quite that old. It's probably like 20.
It's like 20 years old.
Yeah, it's like 20. Yeah.
So reality blew up, and I wonder how many people were watching that thinking of the reality of it.
Yeah, probably not many, because comes off as like a sort of a classic scare thriller horror movie, you know. And you said that what I was laughing about before is you said no spoilers. That film, it's hard to spoil that film because it leaves everything up in the air. No spoilers, like,
Well,
right?
but things that
Yeah,
happen a lot. I mean, because there's not a
yeah,
lot going on. I mean, that you
yeah.
can't. I don't even want to tell any plot. I mean, that's the end of it.
It's
But
more just like it leaves you on the edge the whole time. Like it's not really about what happens or the end. It's just about leaving you on that hair razor's edge of being like, what is going to happen? Like wondering what's going on the whole time. That's what that film does really well.
I don't think it would. I mean, with 20 years of reality television, I think I mean, I haven't seen it, so I think if people watch it, they would maybe think it's silly. I don't think it would stand up
I don't think it
as
holds up.
much
Yeah, I
because
don't
of the
think you can
reality.
watch it up anymore. Yeah.
I did do a show that I wrote, a musical parody I did in San Francisco about 10 years ago, where we parodied all sorts of horror movies. And we actually filmed a little clip of that, thinking it was too old, that, the kids wouldn't get it. And like, it got applause. So it's still in people's film heads.
Still there.
And I know
yeah.
we had a diverse audience. So there were people of our age. So what other horror movies are your favorites?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was going to ask you that. So I love The Conjuring and I love Hereditary. Those are two of my top 10 all-time favorite horror films. I love The Conjuring because I love like the jump scare movies. It like builds the suspense and then something pops out and scares you. The older I get, the harder it is for that to actually work on me. I find that like I'm kind of ready for it and like looking for it. And so when I actually get scared, I'm like, wow. And that movie, The Conjuring, had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. And that's, that only came out like 6 years ago, I think, something like that. It's not an old film. But it sparked like all those Annabelle movies, which I think The Conjuring 2 was pretty good. And then I didn't see any of the Annabelle movies and I heard that they weren't very good. Like I said, I like Hereditary. And most of that is, a lot of it's Toni Collette's performance. That's one of the best acted roles in any horror film ever. And all the acting in that movie is incredible, but her performance in particular is just ridiculous. And for me, what's the newest one by that same director? The one with the kids going to the woods in like a European country?
I don't know.
It's by the same director. It'll come to me. The Conjuring. The Conjuring. Hereditary is like a million times like better than that. What about you, Toddy?
I meant to go see Hereditary because I'm a huge Toni Collette fan. I like anything she's in, and I missed it somehow.
Streaming, you'll find it, I think, on Netflix or Hulu or something like that.
Oh, I'll find it because it's October in the season, so I want to watch a few good ones.
Yeah. What's your overall like favorite horror movies?
Well, of course, I mean you can't talk horror without the master, Alfred Hitchcock.
Sure.
You know, The Psycho. I mean, again, my mom and all of her friends said, "Well, we didn't shower for years." I said, "For years? No, for years." And I'm like, wow. And just it's an amazing film. We were talking about Halloween. Again, doing the parodies, I had remembered Halloween to be a slasher film, and rewatching
Technically it is. Yeah.
It's scary.
Yeah.
And it's Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis. Yeah.
That's right. I was going to say that. It introduced her as the head scream queen, but that is one of the first independent films, and it's not gory. The original, it's really good.
Yeah, there's not like a lot of blood and guts or anything in the original. It's just a suspense. It's still a slasher film, right? Because you've got a guy literally going around and murdering people, and that's the definition of a slasher film. But we always tend to associate like blood and gore with those, and Halloween does a really good job of not needing the actual like blood and guts to be really scary. So there's something to be said for that. And I actually even like the updated one, the latest one that had Jamie Lee Curtis in it. I thought that one was also really good.
I think I saw that too. That wasn't. You know what's a great horror film, again, that doesn't use too many special effects, is The Eye, the Chinese film. And they did make, I think Scarlett Johansson was in a remake. Don't quote me, but I heard that it was terrible, and I never would see the American remake. But it's about a chick that gets a go. I'm getting the willies just thinking of it. She gets, she's blind, and she gets an eye transplant where she can finally see. But of course, what she sees are dead people, and they use the camera and they use the person's face for fear. I mean, just she knows something's behind her, and it's a tight shot, and the camera slowly is panning, and it uses very little special effects. In fact, there is a special, like a digital effect, and it's just not as scary. You notice it in that film. You're like, yeah, I could have done without that.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, really uses just great camera work. But I highly recommend that. Yeah, I thought of this topic because a bunch of my friends are saying, what are some good scary movies? It's October. Everybody has their favorites, and
The Platform. Have you seen The Platform, Todd?
No.
That is a film that's actually it's a horror film because it has a lot of gore and crazy stuff in it, and murdering and stuff like that. But it's also like more of a philosophical exploration, like akin to like Snowpiercer. It's like vertical Snowpiercer. And so basically, so all these people are in this giant structure that has all these floors, and it's got like 2 people per floor. And this platform lowers with food on it down through the floors, and in a big hole through all these floors, this platform lowers and it's loaded with food at the top. And as it goes down, people eat the food, and it only stays on each floor for like, I think, a minute or a certain amount of time. So you have to eat as much food as you can. And so the people at the top inevitably get more food than the people at the bottom. But it's like this thing where if the people at the top weren't such pigs and they left food for people at the bottom, then you wouldn't have this like miserable, situation going on. So it's like this exploration of like humanity and society, and like sort of a microcosm of society. And it's really good. Really, really well done. Although it does have a lot of nasty violence in it. And I thought the ending was incredible. That's actually, come to think of it, if you can call that one horror, that's absolutely one of my
Well, that's the thing too about the genres that they Halloween has a lot of really silly comedic scenes that I think add to the horror.
Right. And I guess a lot of old school horror films are kind of like that. Some of them have a lot of comedy in there, or they're so over the top they become funny, like the Jason films and stuff like that. Even Freddy Krueger. And Freddy Krueger had a lot. I used to love those films.
See, I'm not as big of a slasher fan. Well, of course, we got to talk about The Exorcist.
I have not seen it.
Wow.
I know. I got a mea culpa on that one, Taddy.
Well, it's just, I was a kid. I'm older than you, but I was a kid. And I couldn't go see it. And, they use that people are passing out in the aisles and stuff,
Really? It was that, yeah.
That was their advertising campaign. And I think it had to have been the number one. I just recently saw a list of the number one box office movies of the years, which of course in our era is all Marvel movies. Right?
Yeah.
But I think The Exorcist was the number one box office of the year. And I think it was nominated for Best Picture, but it's Ellen Bernstein. It's like there's a lot of improv in that. And it adds, again, this is my point, it adds to the horror. It's about a mother and a daughter. The little girl gets possessed, and they established with this Oscar-winning actress this relationship. It's beautiful, and there's this whole bedtime scene that was 100% improvised after the Linda Blair is the young girl. After she got to know her enough where they felt more like mother and daughter in real life, and then they rolled the cameras and let them improv and say goodnight, and it's it's a good long scene where you're like, what's going on? This just looks like a woman putting her daughter to bed. Well, that's what's going on. They're establishing a relationship, and that's the only way good horror works. So as an actor, that segues into the fact that I would love to be in a horror film.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That genre,
good one.
And it's so fun. It's so varied. And then I was watching, there's a couple of horror films that have come out recently that have been like, to me, they're stretching the definition of the genre a little too thin. Like there's some films I would have loved to be in, but then watching them, I was like, I don't get this movie at all. It doesn't seem like horror to me. It's by that, I don't know the director's name, But he did The Witch, spelled the Vivitch. You know, like when you see it, it's the VV itch.
Yeah, you mean the one about Salem era?
Correct.
Brilliant movie.
You liked it. I did not like it. I did not. And I
It's
didn't
taken
like
exactly from every single thing in that movie was from that era. They pulled everything out of actual manuscripts from that era of what people thought about. Which, I mean, everything in there that all the dialogue was real.
Right, and I think the way the production value was incredible. I just thought that it had no story, and I didn't get what it was supposed to be. I was like, wait, I guess I went in expecting it to be scared because it was marketed as a horror film, and I was never scared. I just was confused by what was going on with the goat, and then it turned out the goat was the Satan thing. I was like, wait, what? And the same director did that movie, The Lighthouse, with Willem Dafoe,
right,
and Robert Pattinson. And in both of the films, I thought the filmmaking was incredible. I thought the acting was incredible. I thought that they were both good movies, but I didn't really like them because I was left being like, wait, what? So it turns out with the Lighthouse that is based on, it was like a retelling of two different whatchamacallit tales from back in the day. Like Robert Pattinson's character represents Prometheus, and Willem Dafoe's represents Proteus, I believe. So it was like putting these two Roman mythological figures together and seeing how they. And I'm like, bro, I don't want him to have to know that in order to enjoy the film. Like,
well, you are correct. That's how his films are.
Yeah, and like that to me. Like, I want to be able to just enjoy a horror. Like, to me, again, I was expecting horror, and I got something that I was like, wait, this wasn't. Really
Those are heady films for sure. I mean,
yeah.
I know, I love The Crucible, so I knew everything about the Salem witch trials. So
that's a good story. You don't have to know anything about the Salem witch trials to enjoy The Crucible. Well,
what I mean is The Witch. It was all that era. So
right, and I think that but my point is just that, like, as a story in and of itself, I didn't get it. It didn't do any the actual, like, whatever. I was like, wait, what is actually happening? Whereas like The Crucible is a very, it's a well told narrative compared to
sure. Yeah, I mean, The Witch is definitely a film.
Right. It's a film. Maybe I'm getting over that. I used to love those kinds of movies, and maybe I'm just kind of like, no, give me something I can like. Take something away from at the end rather than being like confused. I used to love that though. Yeah.
So there's a warning for The Witch. I loved it, but I like that. I mean, and it's based on all real things. Like, those people actually thought all that stuff. Like, you would murder your children for playing with an animal because, animals are witches' familiars. Like, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. You might want to rethink that a little.
I mean, Todd, let's be honest here. There's a reason they had to leave England. They were too crazy. Like, I'm serious. Like, we like to, in history class, we're sold that they came here for religious freedom. Yeah, that's true. So that they could practice, so that they were free to practice the craziest form of religion. That's what they wanted to do.
Well, but it was going on in Europe too, though. You got to remember.
But they were so crazy. They were too crazy for the people. Like, there was a lot of crazy stuff happening in Europe. They were too crazy for those fuckers. They had to come to the U.S. and establish a whole new colony so they could practice something even crazier that was happening.
Yeah,
in Europe. That's the way I interpret it. And that's not what we're taught in school. But if I was a history teacher, that is the way that I would sell it to my students.
It's a good thing Seth isn't a history teacher. So wait, this was about? Being a history teacher. What was the episode? Well, I hope we gave you some great movies. We talked about a lot of horror movies. I think
talked about a lot of horror films.
You could watch it again and just write it. We should have told you to get your pens out.
Are we at time? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
We're at time.
All right.
We've talked enough about horror, but we've given you some great ones. I don't think we've talked about Go to Hitchcock.
Yeah, the Hitchcock. The Birds is one of my favorite Hitchcocks.
Birds is great.
I watched that as an adult and was scared by it.
All of Hitchcock's. Rebecca's even great. That he won an Oscar for Best Picture.
I never saw Rebecca.
Spooky. It's more spooky films, but yeah. All right. Well, I know what to watch. I'm going to watch Hereditary. I promise that. So if you want to ask me next episode.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next time. It's a great movie.
Yeah.
All right.
Goodbye. Well, be safe.
Bye,
Don't
everybody.
have nightmares.
Yeah.
And email us at
theoutsidersbiz@gmail.com.
biz.
That's right.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Dreams.